or the 2023 tax levy. Is that okay with everybody?
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah, I would take a motion to do that.
So moved.
Is there a second? Maggie seconded it. Any other questions or discussion? All in favor saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. All right, tonight we're here for a second Truth and Taxation meeting. We had the first one back on December 5th when we talked about setting the original levy, which we did set at 4.8 million, I believe. But there was an issue where it ended up getting flipped around, and the amount that everybody received with their estimated taxes was a lower amount because a lower amount ended up getting reported to the county and the state somehow. So with that, I'm gonna look to, City Administrator Josh Tetzloff to give a little explanation and.
Yes, excuse me. Yeah, so at our last meeting, we normally would have approved our tax levy and budget. We did end up approving the budget compensation and CIP. The one item that council did not vote on was the 23 tax levy, payable in 24. And as Mr. Mayor stated, that the reason for this was uncertainty at the state regarding how much New Prague would be able to levy. So on Tuesday, Scott County appealed on behalf of New Prague to the Minnesota Department of Revenue, and the Commissioner of the Department of Revenue issued an order allowing the city of New Prague to levy up to what it originally intended, which would be $5,114,295. And I have attached that exact order is in your packet. As you guys likely remember, well, we had worked over the fall to reduce that amount, and the final amount of that intended levy was $5,049,698. This would have been a 4.62% increase over 2023. While not an official order, one of the recommendations of the commissioner in his order last week was that New Prague not levy any higher than it did in 2023. While this is a recommendation, it is not a hard order, so the city council certainly has a choice on what it would like to levy going into next year. A major consideration that the city council should make with this levy is that with the approved budget, how it will affect future levying, borrowing, and projects. I've included a breakdown of possible levy amounts in your packet and how it would potentially affect the levy in 2025, including whether we levy the same amount as we did last year, which is the recommendation from the Department of Revenue, a 2.31% increase for this year, or the fully intended 4.62% increase. As with prior discussions we've had, I made an assumption of a 5% increase next year just to kind of show how a levy this year could affect next year's. Really, which tracks with surrounding communities and kind of how they've levied recently year over year. And so after receiving the order from the commissioner, I did consult with City Attorney Scott Riggs. And at that time, it was his recommendation, and I kind of agreed, that following the Department of Revenue's recommendation for levying the same as last year was probably the best thing for this, as an attempt to not shock people over what current taxes are that we collected here in 23. While this does mean a potentially higher increase for 25, it does cover most of the lost revenue from being short of what we had initially had intended. Looking into 25, we'll certainly do our best to keep any potential increases down, but it may mean a slightly higher than normal increase over 25, though the net effect would have ultimately been the same over a 2-year period. So I did include 3 resolutions in your packet, an A, B, or C, kind of both as examples or as resolutions to choose from, whichever one you decide to go forward with. And I will certainly stand for questions if you have them. And I'm, I guess, speaking for Scott, but I'm sure he will as well.
So you mentioned we were originally at, we set the original levy at what, 5.1%?
Not 5.1%.
Okay.
So the original levy was set at 5% over last year, which
Okay.
equaled about $5.1 million.
Okay, and we've dropped that down to 4.6.
Yes, we had, over the fall, dropped that down to 4.62%.
I just want to make a point, because you state that in your memo too. The council did not agree on the 4.62. We never got that.
No, I
because
mean, it was
when you
kind of,
say
it was
the-
kind of what, the 4.62 was kind of what had been gravitated towards.
That was the proposal, right?
Yes.
The full intended, I think that's misspeaking, and it's not the full intended 4.62 because we never got that far determined.
Point.
I was still asking
Okay.
for a $50,000 reduction because of different issues, and so, just so we're clear, we're not starting on the same number, because we don't have a good starting number because we didn't agree upon anything. But I think your construct is right, but I just want to make that clear, because
Okay.
it's kind of misleading how it's worded here, but,
And
sorry, I interrupted.
No, that's all fine. Go ahead, Maggie.
I would like to ask Josh and Scott, the reasoning to take the recommendation from the commissioner at the 4.8 million.
So I think, I guess, coming from my recommendation, I think at this point, when we spoke with the commissioner and a few of the people from the office, there seemed to certainly be some uncertainty as to these waters we were potentially treading into. I know there are certain forms that we need to fill out, and the commission didn't feel like, well, at least under the original thoughts when we were doing the do not levy and just end up levying what we did last year, there were thoughts on that and that we wouldn't be able to fill out these forms properly, potentially resulting in a reduction. I believe we talked about that at the last meeting. Now, when they've given us, I guess, the option of moving forward either at 5.1 million or below, I guess to me it feels like we reached out to them for a solution and they provided one, and they kind of, in a way, people's taxes should be similar to last year, I guess, and so without notification that, hey, your taxes may be going up, anywhere from 4 to 5% or however that ends up landing, it won't necessarily shock them one way or the other. Does that make sense? And I realize I'm trying to describe something in my head that makes total sense, and I'm searching for words at this point.
But the fact is that if we do that, then 2025 could be even a bigger shock.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, then we have to explain that. So
Yeah, it could be.
it's a concern.
Scott White?
And I could jump in quickly too, to further to what Josh had said, and I agree with him. I think you're the commissioner of the Department of Revenue is exercising statutory authority to assist the city here. The commissioner's made some recommendations. There are 3 of them. You're following 2 for sure. You've already done those. The 3rd is to stick with last year's levy. I think they're looking at that, and I would concur with this. That's the least intrusive, most conservative type response, because if you failed to do a levy, that would be your levy next year. That's what it would be.
Yes.
They were worried about notice, and the mayor can comment on this because he was at the meeting as well. They were worried about how do you get information out to folks to let them know, even though you had your meetings, you conducted them properly, you had numbers there, hadn't agreed on them, as Bruce pointed out, but you had given notice of what a levy would be up to at that point. But then it went out with different information with the county mailings. And that's what I think the commissioner was concerned about. I think they really thought hard about this and realized the city was in a difficult position with what the numbers were turning out and felt this was a good solution. That's why I agree. I think it's a good recommendation, and the commissioner strongly recommended sticking with that 2023 levy amount. So I agree with that. And that would be the fallback, in fact, if you did not certify a levy.
Yeah.
That's the reality.
And then Scott, to follow up on that, just so we do our due diligence, what are the ramifications if we don't follow their recommendation?
Yeah, that's unknown waters. In all honesty, I think that's what the commissioner tried to stress when we were at this meeting is they're in territory they have not dealt with. I've heard anecdotally before through the league that this has happened in other communities, but not to this degree, where smaller cities fail to adopt a levy and they go back to the previous year's levy. In this case, I think you're in the best position if you follow what the commissioner's done, because the commissioner is the only one who has the authority to say, do this levy this way. Now, I don't believe they have the authority to tell you absolutely what it has to be, and Josh pointed that out. I think you could still go up higher. I don't recommend you do that, because I think we're in the best position to point to your constituents, your taxpayers, that you followed what the Department of Revenue said to do. It's actually less than what you originally had proposed at this point in time, but it's the safest position, I think. Most defensible.
Explain something, Josh. I thought there was like a penalty of we were risking a 5% of LGA being pulled away. Is that?
Well, and that's what I'd mentioned if we didn't,
Get these forms.
if we basically didn't pass a levy, it was their interpretation of it that we would struggle to fill out a state-required form, and if you don't fill out that form by, I think, January 30th, then that is when the penalty would kick in. That being said, we believe we could fill out the form, and so we were also treading into water there. Did we want to test that out?
Okay, I'm sorry, I got that confused with Scott saying they're in uncharted
No,
territory.
and Josh is right. That's exactly what it is. There'd be roughly a $60,000 penalty for the LGA if we could not provide that form. We think you probably could, but again, the Department of Revenue was not clear that they believed the city could, so it's just another risk.
And they've kind of given us an out at this point, so where we don't even have to test that.
Okay, anything else? Otherwise, does the public want to speak to the council in regards to this?
Name and address if they do.
Yeah, what you need to do, okay, good. What you need to do is come up here, state your name and address at the microphone, and then make your comment.
My name's David McAllister. I live at 112 First Street Northeast, just right down the road here. My question is, whose fault was this error?
I guess ultimately, so the city council passed a resolution stating their intent for their preliminary proposed levy. Staff then took that and submitted that information to Scott County. Scott County has informed us that we had filled out the paperwork incorrectly, and so we attempted to fill it out correctly for the council's intent, and that's what got submitted. And I guess the paperwork was misinterpreted by us as to what Scott County was intending for us to put on the paperwork, and so the wrong information got submitted.
So, on my proposal, I look here, all the other cities, didn't happen to them.
No, you're right.
So you can't blame Scott County, you can't blame the state of Minnesota.
We're not.
Correct, and I will say,
Well, I didn't get really a straight answer.
No. I
Yeah,
think-
y'all kind of beat around the bush like typical politicians. But my question here, if the 4.62 goes into effect, from my proposed for 2024 to the 4.62, my proposed would go up 26.36%. And y'all disvalued my home by $23,500.
That'd be right.
so I guess I can't speak, I can't
can't.
speak, I can't speak to the math, on that. I can say that the city taxes
You
make
wanna
up,
see the proposal and my proposal right here?
I can't, I will say the city taxes make up a third of your overall taxes,
Okay.
about.
Right there, minus 21.74.
Correct, and so the city portion is just right here. I can't speak to, not everything else would go up. It would, basically, we'd be talking about this line
Because that's
right here.
overall.
Oh, just, okay.
Yes, it would be just the city.
And as you can see right here, the value of my house went down.
Yes,
But yet my taxes are gonna go up.
Doesn't it reflect your city taxes going down though, on that form?
Well, this was the proposed, Somebody made an error.
Right.
and us homeowners are gonna have to pay for it. I know before I retired, if I made an error like this, I would be unemployed. But nothing's gonna happen, you know? But, and it's convenient that we only get 1 day notice about this meeting. And convenient that it happens between Christmas and New Year's, when there's probably lots of families on vacation out of town. And from what I saw on Facebook today, I thought there would be more people that were concerned than this little bit. But this is bullshit,
Sir,
in my
sir,
opinion.
please
Don't
watch-
swear, please.
Watch your language, please.
Okay, this is crap. Y'all screwed up, but nobody wants to stand up, man up and say, yeah, it was me. And so us taxpayers have to pay for it.
Well, it wasn't just one person. It was paperwork that the city submitted to the county, that the calculations were misinterpreted, and the state contacted the county to verify the numbers, and there was miscommunication between those two parties as well. So it was multiple people that were affected.
But yet, all these cities got it right.
Are all those cities in Scott County?
Yeah, this
Okay.
is on the
Yeah,
proposal.
well, I mean,
And it's, when I look at it, percent change, New Prague, negative 18.53%.
right, well, and that.
Then
that's the
Jordan
mistake.
is the only other one that has a negative, and that's 0.8%, less than 1%.
Well,
But y'all didn't see this or take that into consideration and think, is something wrong?
well, clearly there was, and that's why the city
That's
went
why
to the
we're here.
commissioner to rectify the situation.
Well, I can say this. This is the second time I've been before the city council. And both times, my elected officials have not had an open mind.
Okay. Yep, thank you.
Free to run for city council then.
Sir,
No,
we're done. We're done. We're done.
excuse me.
Nope, you're done.
That she can make that comment?
No, I said you're free to run for city council
As
if
I'm
you'd like to
walking
get
away,
involved.
you get a little snarky
No.
not when I'm up here?
You're done.
See it right there. Deaf ears.
Quit making threats.
I haven't made any
Leave.
threats.
Please leave. Please leave.
I
Right
haven't
now.
made any
Please
threats.
leave.
Yeah. Thank you. Can I ask one question?
Please leave.
Don't,
Please leave.
you're done.
Thank you.
Real fair.
Sir, in the yellow, did you have a question or comment that you wanted to make?
Yeah.
Just come up here and state your name and address, please.
My name is Steve Johnson. I live at 1502 9th Street Southeast here in town. And I just have a few questions. Is the levy the city's operating budget?
Yes.
Okay.
So the levy makes up the operating budget as well as the debt service.
Right.
Generally.
So I got my notice in the mail and I looked at it and I'm like, my taxes are going down. And I thought twice there, because when's the last time taxes went down, right? So just to make it clear for me, the city gets state money, correct?
Yes, the
We
state,
get local
yes.
government aid.
So
So-
most cities across the state get some portion of money from the state
Okay.
through a program called local government aid.
All right.
Correct.
And that makes up part of your levy / operating budget.
Yep.
Correct.
And so is that the number that was taken into consideration but wasn't
Was
accounted for?
misaccounted for, correct.
So what's the increase in taxes from 2023, which I've already paid,
Mhm.
going forward into 2024?
So that is the discussion that is being had
And
tonight.
you're talking five-ish?
So there's, the discussion right now is anywhere from keeping them the same as 2023,
Right.
which due to valuation changes may cause a slight change in
Yeah.
your actual amount. They may go slightly up, slightly down, roughly the same, to anywhere, up to the preliminary discussions back in September was about a 5% increase. So the talk is somewhere between there.
And what's, based on history, what's normal year to year?
About that.
4 to 5%?
So, yeah.
So when all said and done, my proposed taxes for 2024 were sent out incorrectly, but they're not gonna be more than 5% above what I paid in 2023.
Generally,
Or is there
I-
something
I-
that we have to make up? Excuse me.
There's
Is
more-
there something we have to make up
There's more
here?
things to that. It's the makeup of the tax capacity. You know,
Okay.
how much is residential, how much is commercial? Actually, the residentials are benefiting this year. So your taxes, all things being equal, if your value didn't go down or up, you'd actually have a reduction,
Okay,
even with our previous budget that we're gonna talk about.
all right.
But if we accept the one that's being presented, that we go back to the previous year, and your value didn't go down, your taxes should go down as a residential. So there's more things that make up for than just the levy increase amount. It's, what's the value of all properties in New Prague, and which properties are valued
Right.
more? And this year, industrial's made a bigger portion of the pie than residential. So that helped out the residential owners.
Sure. Because I'd have to go back and look at the form to see what the percentage that I was technically gonna go down. But this gentleman previously mentioned an 18% reduction. So if you take that 18% and throw it away and add the 5%, that's where you're coming up with the 23% here?
correct, yeah.
Roughly?
Yeah, so, and if you look at it, city taxes roughly make up about a third of your total tax bill, too.
Right.
And so, if all things be considered equal, if you saw a 5% increase on your particular city taxes, you would have to take in the county and school taxes as well as to where
Right.
you'd land, because the school was also proposing a decrease.
Okay. And I got a $1,500 property tax refund this year, so I mean, I don't see this as that,
You were lucky.
that big a deal. I mean, you know, but when you see that number, that 23%, that's what, like, I gotta go to this meeting, you know, to find out what's going on. And I have one other thing I'd like to ask or discuss. So I live on 9th Street over near Settlers Park. And there used to be a beautiful wildlife area in Settlers Park, which is now gone, all the trees removed. And my question is, what is the reasoning and the thought process behind that? I understand a grant was issued for tree removal, and in my eyes, that should be used for emerald ash borer and, what's the other one?
So I will take
Yeah,
this
so,
real,
yeah.
I'll take this real quick, because it's kind of getting us off subject.
Sure, I
of the
know, I
public
just,
hearing.
I had the,
But basically, the city received a grant to return that area to what it was initially intended when it was constructed 20 years ago-ish, which was more tall grass prairie.
Okay.
So the city left all the very, very large trees, cut out kind of what you'd call the scrub trees.
Yeah.
And will be planting tall grass prairie, stuff that's growing 3, 4, 5 feet some years.
Okay.
To take its place.
because I know they took out some 100-year-old oak trees in there.
I would have to look into that.
There's a few
but-
left, but there's quite a few still gone.
Okay,
And when
and
I-
you can certainly call and we can discuss this like during city hall
Sure.
hours if you'd like.
Yeah.
'Cause I know we're supposed to stay on
Okay.
public hearing here, so.
All right, okay, thanks
I
thanks
appreciate
for your
that.
time.
Thank you. Anybody else want to comment? Anybody else? Okay. I'll close the comment session, and, before the council is to accept, to approve the 2023 taxable or the 2023 tax levy payable in 2024. Is there any questions of the council? I guess, I would take our attorney's recommendation and the Commissioner of Revenue's recommendation, to do the, 4.824 million.
So if that is the recommendation, that would be resolution 23-12-27-1A.
Okay. Does somebody want to make a motion?
So moved.
Rick made a motion to approve that, resolution. Is there a second? I'll second it. Any discussion?
I'd just like to make a couple of comments.
Yep.
I appreciate the illustration as far as projection for the next 3 years, and so that highlights kind of the thinking, and so the public knows that we did do our due diligence and at least go through that. My numbers would, if I did it, would probably be a little lower than this, or just so we're not building expectations that this is what we're doing. As I said earlier, we didn't ever get to the chance to finalize what we thought the final levy would be. And I know there's still some consideration being given for a lower number than the 4.62, so we didn't get there. So if we had used a lower number and then increased it, my number comes out a little lower than this. But, and then also to comment about your comment in the narrative about tracking to surrounding communities. I think it's dangerous if we start tracking against other communities. I think it's good information to know what other communities are doing, but I don't think that we want to, I think we use that as a guideline or good information, but when I think about the levy and what it should be, I look at what our tax capacity is doing, going up or down or staying the same. This year we had benefited from a material increase in LGA, which was another funding source for us. The increase in our tax capacity was an additional funding source for us this year. So we had additional funding that we didn't in the previous years. And I think we have to look at what our needs are when we're looking at our levy. And that's not to say that I wouldn't recommend 8% next year or 9%, but I'm not sure that we want to be tracking necessarily about other communities. The percentages don't work out when we look at other communities. They have different budgets, they have different needs. If they have a bigger budget, a 3% means more to them than a 3% to us. So, and then I'm conscious of our assessment policy because we have very successfully done a dramatic number of capital projects for the last 15, 20 years. So we have probably half of our residents, I would guess, that are paying assessments. So that's all part of your tax roll too. So I don't know that we need to self-criticize ever so much about always trying to keep our tax rate low. I think we have to look at the big picture. We certainly have to address our needs, but I think I don't want to for us to necessarily build expectations what next year is going to be. I might support something very much higher, but I think the illustration is good, and that's what we're doing. I think is going to limit the dramatic increase anyway. So those are my comments.
Thank you, Bruce.
Yeah, well said.
Yep, very good. Okay, any other questions or discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. I take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
There's been a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you. Thank you, everybody.